Okay, hey there, everybody. We're going to take a quick look at getting Unity, installing it, and basically kind of using Unity a little bit, specifically as it pertains to the C Sharp Programming 1 class at Wilkes Community College. So we do use Unity in that. So if you're in Moodle, you can go to the link that we've got there in Moodle. Should bring you to a Unity 3D page, which might look different than this, but so we're going to go ahead and just do a Get Unity Now. We're going to do the personal one, which is free. So we'll go ahead and download that, download the installer. And once that's downloaded, we'll go ahead and start our installation. And wait a second for that. There it goes. Okay, yeah, we'll do that. Thank you, Norton. I really appreciate that. Whatever. Go away. Oh, and as that stuff's going, you have options to look at some Unity resource and whatnot. So you can see this currently, when I'm making this, the newest version is 5.5. So I'll go ahead and say next. I accept, next. 64-bit. Basically, yeah, you're going to want 64-bit. So next. So right here, it's up to you what all you want to install. Uh, Odds are you're going to want to install basically everything. You might not want the example project, but whatever, you might as well. Um, so you could just select everything here. Now, one thing in the lab, we actually have the lab set up so that it does not use Microsoft Visual Studio. We're using MonoDevelop, which is the one that comes with Unity by default. However, for my personal development, I do use Visual Studio. So I would recommend using Visual Studio. But if you want it to act just the same way as it does in the lab on campus, then don't install Visual Studio. Use the built-in MonoDevelop. Do be aware that with the Visual Studio, you will have to create a license for it or an account with Microsoft. It's free, so it won't cost anything, but you will have to create that. And then just next and go on through and install. Okay, so let's say that we've got it installed. Go ahead and close out of some windows here. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Unity. Now my version I've got on here is 5.4, which is the same version as in the lab. Now when you launch the 5.5, it does look just a little bit different, but not drastically different. So we come up here to basically our start page here within Unity. The options here, the projects here, these are projects that have been recently opened that we could then select to go ahead and open those projects. Or we could use the open right here, which we'll take a look at in a few minutes, to go ahead and open another one. Or we could do new to open a new project. Now when you first launched Unity, however, it would not have come up to here. You would have had to go through a licensing process, and when you do that, just be sure to select the free personal edition and you'll probably have to create an account with them. It's a free account, so no big deal there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create us just a new project here to start off with. And let's see, I'm going to go ahead and put this on my desktop at the moment, and I'll just select that. So my project is going to be stored on my desktop. I'm going to give my project a name. I'm going to call this I'm going to call it example. I'm going to try to spell that correctly. Example project, like so. And I can specify 2D or 3D, but that's really not relevant, and I'll show you why as soon as we get into Unity. So I'm going to go ahead and create this project. So do a create new project on that. And Unity will take just a moment here to get going. And once it comes up, we'll take a look at some stuff inside Unity. Alright, boom, 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 boom. Go Unity. Okay, so here we are. So this, actually your window should not look like this. You should look like the default. You should look something like this. Okay, so all of these panes that we have here inside Unity are things that we can move around and set up however we want. So like this inspector, I can grab it. I can just click on the tab right there and just pull it out wherever I want. I can make it a floating thing like this. I can put it on my other monitor if I want. I can put it basically wherever I want. So for right now, I'm just going to put it over there. Actually, actually no I'm not. I'm going to put it, let's see, where do I want to put you? Now notice as I'm grabbing by this gray part, see how I can't reattach it. So to reattach it back in there, I have to actually have that tab. And let's see. Yeah, I'll put it back there for now. And I'm going to grab the hierarchy and I'm going to put it over here as well. Project, I'm going to pull it out from there. Do something like that. I'm going to pull console out from there and put it there. And now this is the way that you saw that I had it set up originally. This is the way that I use Unity. That does not mean this is the way that you have to use Unity. Set these up however you want, whatever works best for you. One other thing with the project here, I usually hit this little drop down with the 3 lines right there, and I do the 1 column layout. That's just my personal preference. If you like the 2 column, then do the 2 column, whatever. Okay, so let's take a look at what these various things are and kind of get an idea of how we can use Unity. First thing, notice when I came in, I changed my layout. That's right up here in this layout drop down. I can go to default, or I can save this current layout, like I'm going to do save layout, and I'm going to call this I'll call it my layout. So that way, if I go to the default, there's my default, and then I can always go back to my layout, and you can basically set this up differently. As you progress in Unity, there will be times you'll use other windows. You'll use the animator window, or you'll use the mechanim window, or you'll be doing other stuff. Now if you have 2 monitors, obviously you can just put something on one of your other monitors, but if you don't, you'll change how things are laid out here based upon what you need and what you're currently working with. So that's the right there, that's the layouts. Next to that is going to be layers. We're not going to worry about layers. Probably touch on that later on this semester, but for getting started, don't need to know too much about that. Here's my account. So I've got my account right here, and right here is notice also when it first launched originally, I had this services open that has to do with this cloud here, networking stuff, MMO kind of stuff. Well beyond anything we're going to actually worry about this semester. So I'll just go ahead and come back here. Okay, so these buttons right here. This is play, pause, and I'm not even sure what that one is. I think that has to do with debugging. I never used that one. So these are to play your game. And so I'm playing my game right now. Notice it switched over to the game tab right here, and this is my current game. Now you might say, well, what can I do in this game? Nothing. We haven't done anything. This is just it. That's all we have. I can pause my game. Pausing a game can be useful at times. Oh, and then we can just step forward. That's what that was for. Yeah, I knew I've used it before. I just couldn't think of what for. So we can pause, and then we can go 1 frame or 1 update at a time. Now, if you're not sure what an update is, great, because that's going to be one of the first things we talk about with our programming stuff is the update loop within Unity. So this will play, this will pause, and if it's paused, this will go to this will do 1 update, and this will stop. If we're playing, that'll stop. Okay, so over here we have our scene view, and this is where we can edit and build our scene. So to kind of get a good idea of how we can manipulate things out here, I'm going to go ahead and just throw something out here real quick. So I'm going to go to a game object, and right here in game object, these are all the, oops, I didn't want to make a particle system. Wasn't really paying attention. So right here in game object, these are all the default objects that we can create within Unity. Now we use a lot of these as starting points for our games, but many times we're going to bring other objects into our games. But for right now, I'm going to create a 3D object, and let's say I'm going to make a cylinder, a capsule. Okay, and there's my capsule. So that is what I've made. So you can see, now we can start to see the rest of this stuff. So at the moment, we're going to focus on our scene view right here. We have 3 things in our scene. We have this capsule we just made. We have this sun looking thing, which is a directional light. And then we have this camera looking thing, which interestingly enough is the camera. Now notice, as I'm clicking things, I bring my mouse over here to this hierarchy panel. This hierarchy panel lists everything that is in our scene. So rather than trying to click on objects in our scene so that we can do stuff with it, I can simply click it right over here. Now, another thing to notice as I'm doing this, notice this tab, which is the inspector panel, it keeps changing. And what it is doing is it is showing the properties of whatever object is currently selected. At the moment, the only property that we're going to really care about at the moment is this one right here, this transform property, or component, really. Unity calls them components. I keep using the term property, but these are components attached to an object. Every single one of these objects has a transform, and the transform component has the position of the object, the rotation of the object, and the scale of the object. If we don't have a position, rotation, and scale, then we don't exist in our game world. If we don't exist in our game world, we're not in the game world. So that's why every single object has to have a transform component. Now these other ones, notice that they're a little bit different for each one of these, and we're not really worried about this is not where we have to go in and we have to flash memorize every component. No, not necessary. All we need to know at the moment is that everyone has a transform and everyone has a name right up here, this name. So this is a capsule right here. So let's say I change the name of this to, I'm going to call this player. Okay, so now that's my player object, or something I've called player. Notice out here it is, the player is right there. Tags and layers. This layer, I can assign it to a layer, and this happens to match the layers right here. And this then allows me to change visibility, as well as some other things. But for the moment, we'll just say it allows me to change visibility. This tag will we'll come to this tag later on. Very useful with collisions, among other things, but collisions mainly. And we'll deal with that later on when we need to. The other thing about the inspector is we can add more components to this object right down here with add component. We click that and we get a list here. And like I could go to network and I could add a network manager component. I don't want to, but I could. I could add a physics rigid body component. Now as you look at these, you might think, well gee, I don't know what any of these components are. Okay, that's fine. You don't need to know what they are yet. We will kind of add our knowledge of these components as we learn about programming and as we need to add components to our objects. So for right now, all we need to be aware of is that there are components that can be added. And so that's how we would do that. One other thing with the inspector is I can lock it with this lock button right here. And what that does is, so if I click something else, notice it's still showing the components, the properties of the player object. That is very beneficial at various times. The main camera, if I have it selected, I see a preview of what my camera sees, which happens to be the same thing as my game view. Okay, coming back here to our scene editor. I'm going to select the player. Now to move around, to interact with our scene editor here, if I hold down the Alt key, so I'm pressing the Alt key on my keyboard, notice how my icon is changing to that eyeball. So I press down the Alt key, left mouse button, so this is Alt and left mouse button both at the same time, and then I start moving my mouse, I can rotate. So I can rotate around things, very helpful. Alt key, right mouse button, zooms in and out. Notice it is zooming in and out specifically on the object that I've selected. At the same time, the scroll wheel works just as well for that too. Alt middle mouse button allows me to pan, so I can go left, right, up, down, but not rotate. So I can move over here, rotate a little bit, move down here, rotate a little bit. You know, if I'm trying to see something in here. And there's a lot of times that, you know, as we're working with 3D environments, that we're trying to see things in there. Okay, so those are our main controls for what we can see in here. Other things that we can do, up here in this top left corner, we have this hand, and basically this hand is the same as Alt. Notice as I press Alt, that icon changes there. Alt left mouse button is still the rotation. Alt right mouse button is the zoom. Alt middle mouse button is our panning. This button here allows us to translate an object. And translate an object means to move it on the X, Y, or Z axis, or two of them or three of them, or whatever. It means it allows us to move something. So I'm going to go ahead, Alt left mouse button to turn this a little bit. And so my player is selected. I'm going to go ahead and kind of move my player maybe. So I can move him around. Notice his position has changed here. If I go to my game view, you can see that it has changed here as well. The next button over is rotate. So I can once again grab an axis and rotate. And the last button is a scale tool. I can either scale non-uniformly by just selecting one of these axes, like so, or I can scale uniformly by selecting the middle one, maybe like so. So you can see we come over here, game, we have this looking thing. Now before you start thinking, oh well that's cool, so that's how I'm going to make stuff I put in my game. No, it's actually not. These allow us to position, rotate, and scale an object. They don't allow us to model an object or sculpt an object or anything like that. Notice up here in our transform, you can see how all of these have changed. If I put my mouse cursor near one of these letters, you can see how I get that double-headed arrow. That means that now if I click, I can actually move here. Sometimes that might be a little bit easier. I can also just come over into here and enter a number. I want this to rotate 15 degrees on the y-axis, for instance. Okay, so that's what I can do there. Now there might come a point where this just gets messed up beyond all recognition. I can hit this gear right here and go to a reset, and that just puts it back to whatever its default was. Alrighty, so yeah, that's our scene view. That's kind of all we care about there. Game view just shows the game as it's running. So there's really nothing to do in our game view. One other thing about scene view, I mentioned when we created this new project that we could do 3D or 2D, and I said it didn't matter, and I'll tell you why later. Well, now it's later. I can click 2D, and I've just changed my game to a 2D game. Now, I want to kind of take my time, well, not necessarily take my time, but that doesn't mean that this player capsule has suddenly become a 2D thing. What it ultimately means is that my camera has been changed to so that I'm only viewing my world on the x-axis, this red one, which is left right, and the y-axis, this green one, which is up down. So your traditional Cartesian coordinate system, notice that my gizmos up here in the top right that had the green, blue, and the red, which is kind of coming out right here, that disappears when I go to 2D. So my main camera, so basically I've changed my perspective here, and that is really all this button is doing. But that is very beneficial. The other thing for going to a 2D game is you change your main camera projection from perspective to orthographic. And orthographic simply cuts off the z-axis, that depth axis that's coming out towards us right there. So if I change this to orthographic, this has changed like so. To get a better feel for this, I'm going to grab my player and I'm going to copy my player. To copy something, you do with it selected in the hierarchy, hit Control D, and you can see we make a couple copies. So I just made 3 copies. I'm going to go ahead and move this around. So I'll move this one over to here. I'll take this guy, move it over to here, and I'll take this guy and let's move it maybe there. Okay. Yeah, let's just move them around a little bit. Let's take a look at our camera, see what we can see. Okay, so we can see our 3 objects here. Now if we take our camera, it's currently in orthographic. If we you notice that all of these look the same. You see the same shading down here at the bottom. Might be easiest if I go to the game view here. See how the shading is consistent on all of them because the z-axis is cut off. If I change this to perspective, notice how this one is shaded differently than this one, This one, they're all slightly different because we are seeing the 3D from there. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, like the difference between 2D and 3D. For our purposes at the moment, and there's more components that can change this as well as we go on. Okay, so we have our scene, our game. We have those things. Components. Okay, so this is our project panel. The project panel contains all the assets that are currently in our project but might not be in our scene. So let's see. I'm going to load Chrome for just a second. I'm going to go grab a picture off of Google Chrome. I'm going to do just grab something here. Let me save this image. Put it on my desktop. I know you can't see what I'm doing. That's okay. Alright. Okay. So what I've done is I have saved a picture on my desktop. Let me kind of move this out of the way a little bit. Right here. Right. So I've got a picture right here. So if I want to import something into my project, I can just grab the thing I want to import, drag it to my project pane, and drop it. And there it is. So I have this picture. That's what it is, and it's a texture. But notice it is not in my hierarchy. It is not in my scene, and it's not out here. So that is the difference between the project and the hierarchy. Project is everything in your project, whereas the hierarchy is what is currently in the current scene. Trying to think if there's anything else that we need to know as far as a quick introduction to Unity. One other thing. If we want to create an object, right, we can come up to the hierarchy and we can do a create. Notice this panel, this drop down here, all of these things. Notice how they're the same thing as the game object create, right? So if I'm creating something in my hierarchy, I'm creating some kind of game object. Essentially, everything that exists in our game world is, generally speaking, some type of game object. And ultimately that means that it is derived from a game object class, meaning that it has certain things. For instance, it has a transform, and it might have other things in common. However, if I go to the project create, there's a whole bunch of other things I can create. These are more along the lines of we can almost, some of these are components. For instance, scripts are components. Some of these are organizational. For instance, a folder. Or we can create a material, and a material can be applied. You can see right out here there's this default material. So if I were to, for instance, I'm going to create a material, and I'm just going to call this new material. And I'm just going to, just to make it different, I'm going to click this box right here next to the albedo, and I'm just going to make it a red material. And I'm going to apply this red material to one of these objects. So to apply this material to one of these things out in my scene, I can just grab this and drag it onto one of them and release it. And now you can see it has this material, whereas these others do not. Okay, so yeah, there we go. That's like a quick introduction to Unity, how we can manipulate, get around in it and whatnot. I think I've covered everything that we need to really understand at this point in time. If there's any of that a little fuzzy about, just send me an email. We'll make sure to get that straightened away. One last thing, this console is basically where things get output to. You can think of this as a command line console. Not really where you're going to input anything, but where stuff can be spit out. Very useful within programming. Other than that, that's a quick introduction to Unity, and any questions, just let me know.